This week, the country's law enforcement authorities made headway in an incredibly sinister case worth delving deep into in this edition of The Lead. The story goes that elite soldiers allegedly abducted two local Islamic State leaders back in 2022, which then got the attention of a senior Hawks detective, only for him to end up dead months later.
The sort of idea that I'm getting at this time, especially based on the conversations I had with my sources, is that this unit has generally operated, as a lack of a better word, a rogue unit that carried out a lot of the dirty work for very powerful people.
It gives you that terrifying feeling that more and more we are living in a mafia state.
We'll get details from our journalists Bernadette Wicks and Tankiso Maketa on this intriguing story for us next. Later in the show, Johannesburg settles its massive escom debt to keep the lights on. And finally, former Cabinet Minister Malusi Gigaba stops the broadcasting of a tell-all show about his personal life.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
Stay tuned until the show's end to hear your voice notes on the previous edition's topic. Here's one of them.
It means if you are related to a politician, you must not be a business person.
And if you'd like to engage us on this episode's topics, send your thoughts and opinions to our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That's 072 562 3179. My name's Graham Robenheimer. Well, let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. A dozen former and current South African National Defence Force members are, as we speak, in police custody in connection with the murder of a senior Hawks detective. Lieutenant Colonel Nhwako Frans Matipa was shot and killed in 2023. That was near the Hammanskraal toll plaza. Now, working with the Hawks Crimes Against the State unit, otherwise known as the CATS, Matipa was tasked with investigating an alleged abduction at the hands of some SNDF members. It's alleged that these elite soldiers, or so-called army recce's as we know it, took two prominent SA-based Islamic State members against their will from the Mall of Africa in Gauteng in 2022. That was the year before. The ISIS leaders, Abdullah Hussein Abdiga and his right-hand man, Kadir Jamal Abutis. Now, both of these individuals are believed to be missing or dead, with the 12 SANDF members now appearing in the Randburg Magistrates Court this week in connection with their deaths, as well as the death of the Hawks official. Now, joining us now from our Johannesburg studio are journalists Bernadette Wicks, as well as Tankiso Maketa. Thank you so much for your time, both of you, and welcome to The Lead. Bernadette, I think let's begin with you. What do we know about where and when these particular SANDF members were arrested? It was two at first, and then what happened?
Yes, Graham. So on Sunday, we know that the first two arrests were made. If I remember correctly, one of those accused was 36 and the other one was about 51 years old. One of them was arrested at OR Tambo International Airport after landing on an incoming flight, and the other was arrested at their home. And then on Monday morning, we know that the remaining 10 accused handed themselves over to the police.
Tankiso, let's bring you in here. What do we understand about the seniority of the Hawks official, Mr. Matipa, and these SANDF members? What are your sources telling you, and what do we know officially on record about their positions? From my understanding of your reporting thus far with Bernadette, as well as our other colleague, Ivan, is that these are fairly senior officials, right?
So firstly, we'll start with Lieutenant Colonel Matipa. He'd been in the service for decades at this point and has worked on a number of high-profile matters, specifically related to corruption. And then he was pulled into the CATS unit because it was fairly new and quite small. And he was handed this docket of these two kidnapped ISIS leaders, and he started looking into it. And based on his investigations, obviously he realized that some SNDF members were involved in the pair's kidnappings. And he started questioning and asking SNDF for records and any kind of documentation that would assist him in his investigation to finding out what actually happened to Abdullah Abdiga and I think it's Kadir Abutis. And that's how we ended up being killed. But the seniority of members is not necessarily something that's been placed on record as yet because of an ID parade that needs to be conducted. So officially, we don't know what their ranks are and who they are. However, during the application, an urgent application that was brought to the Johannesburg High Court by one of the victims, or one of the kidnapped victims' brother, a responding affidavits from the SNDF does mention the names of the senior members who were responsible for the operation that was carried out on the day the kidnapping happened. So officially we don't know, but there are court records that are there that identify at least 2 senior SNDF members. One of them is a former head of that unit, and the other one was responsible for the operation itself that was carried out.
Sure. Bernadette, you were in court this week for these 12 members appearing in the dock. Obviously, the 2 had appeared first, and then suddenly, obviously, the case expanded with all 12. As I understand it, they obviously didn't want the media to be able to identify them, as per what Tankiso just told us. So take us inside court. I'm sure it was a very quick proceeding, right?
Yes, so it was a long morning of waiting, obviously, because the second group handed themselves over only on Monday morning. It meant they still needed to be processed before they could actually be brought before the court with the other 2 who had been arrested the day before. So that took some time, and proceedings really only got underway just after midday, I think. Proceedings themselves, like you say, were very brief. They asked for a remand until next week, when the accused are going to apply for bail. In the interim, like Tank indicated, we are not allowed to identify or photograph any of the accused, and that's because they need to still take part in an identity parade. We are expecting that to be wrapped up by their next appearance, though. They were very bundled up in hoodies and scarves and glasses and hats, anything they could get their hands on to cover up their faces. There were, like we said, 12 of them in a very small dock, so they were cramped up quite tightly. They looked a little uncomfortable, sort of shuffling in their spot, but you couldn't really make out much about their demeanor because of all the things that they were wearing, and because there were so many of them. But it was postponed until the 1st of July, which is next Tuesday, and they will be applying for bail. The state also did indicate that it is going to oppose that application.
But Bernadette, you and the team, you've already accessed some of the state prosecutors' version of events on record, placed on the court record thus far. So you've gotten access to some of the court papers, revealing a little bit of the extent of what the involvement allegedly of these 12 SNDF members in this entire matter has been thus far. What have they revealed?
What we do know from the court documents is that they're facing a number of charges. So there are 3 counts of murder, there are multiple counts of kidnapping, there are multiple counts of fraud, there's a count of lying under oath, there's a count of obstructing the administration of justice. And essentially a lot of these relate to the alleged kidnapping that they were involved in. The charge of lying under oath in a statement we know emanates from statements they made after the alleged kidnapping, where they indicated that there was a training operation at the Mall of Africa where the alleged kidnapping took place on that day. And then we also know that they filed a report of a hijacked vehicle earlier this year. I believe it was in February. That was in fact the vehicle that was allegedly used in Matipa's shooting. And from what we know, it was not in fact hijacked. The state alleges that it was in fact just taken to a scrapyard and dumped there.
Okay, so help us understand this here. So essentially, as prosecutors have put it, the accused here, they tried to stage some sort of hijacking. They then sort of filed an apparent insurance claim, all to sort of make it look like something completely different here. But yet the Hawks have also been investigating, obviously, their colleague's murder. Help us paint a little bit of a timeline of events as you understand it at this stage, Bernadette.
So we know that the alleged kidnapping took place, obviously, in 2022, late 2022. And then we know that Matipa was killed in August 2023, so almost a full year later. These arrests only came almost 2 years after that, after Matipa's death, and almost 3 years after the alleged kidnapping. The the indications that we're getting are that the suspect, the accused at least, became worried about this vehicle that had been used in Matipa's murder, and they wanted to get rid of it and any evidence, obviously, that would have been contained in that vehicle. And so a couple of months ago, when things were obviously hotting up on the investigators' side, they obviously staged this, or they're accused of staging this hijacking, and then, like you say, falsifying a police report, and then also falsifying an insurance claim that was lodged for that vehicle.
And then Tankiso, in terms of your sources within the Hawks, and obviously they are remaining nameless, we're not identifying them at this stage. What are they saying about filling in the blanks of this timeline of events as we understand it thus far in relation to what Bernadette just indicated to us as per what's been put on the court roll?
This emanates from the kidnapping of Abadiga and Abatis, right? And as a result of that, Matipa was looking into that, and Matipa wanted to get records and get more information into that until he was killed. At that point, when he was investigating, there was an urgent application that was lodged at the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg. This application detailed the movements of Abadiga and Abatis on the day that on the day they were kidnapped. But they also detailed movements of a few of the members aligned or affiliated to the Special Forces unit who were also coincidentally at the Mall of Africa on the same day, and also left the vicinity at the same time as Abadiga. So that's the point where it starts from. Moving on into the investigations, they were able to trace the vehicles that were used on the day of the kidnapping. And then fast forward to that, Matipa, because all of this happened between January and March of 2023. Matipa got this docket in April of 2023. By August, he had already compiled enough evidence to, subpoena some of these SNDF members. He had a meeting with the prosecutor at the Randburg Magistrate Court, SNDF members, and himself, explaining why he needed to access some of these soldiers and whatever it is that they had. 2 days later, he was murdered. It appeared as though the investigation of the kidnapping was put on hold, while the investigation of Matipa, took place. But while taking place, my sources are telling me that there was a lot of resistance that they were receiving from higher ups within the SNDF, and we're talking about generals, we're talking about majors, and to a certain degree, some politicians as well. We don't know the names of these people at the moment, and this is probably why it's taken so long for the arrest to be made. I mean, nearly 2 years, because a lot of resistance was being mounted against them. Yeah, I think in essence, that's where we are in terms of the timeline.
Sure. And for anyone listening at this point, the ISIS members that Tankiso is referring to is the Iraq and Syria ISIS leader based here in the Gauteng region. His name is Abdullah Hussein Abadiga, and of course the right-hand man, Kadir Jamal Abatis, who were both taken from the Mall of Africa in 2022. So then, in other words, we're left with a kind of like a few patches that obviously will come out eventually once bail proceedings get underway, and we'll certainly get more details about what exactly happened. But Tankiso, in terms of your sources, what are they saying about these SANDF members specifically, about who they sort of answer to? You've already sort of alluded to that there might be sort of very higher up officials involved here, but obviously nameless at this point.
The sort of idea that I'm getting at this time, especially based on the conversations I had with my sources, is that this unit has generally operated as in lack of a better word, a rogue unit that carried out a lot of dirty work for very powerful people. I mean, they are also implicated in, I don't know if I can step into this realm, but they're also implicated in the Lady R docking in Simonstown a couple of years ago. They implicated in a sense that they allegedly offloaded some of the weapons that or alleged weapons that were carried on the ship at the moment. So those are the type of stories that are coming out from my sources regarding this specific unit. And as far as who they answered to, probably higher ups in the SNDF, because one of the affidavits that was deposed in the urgent application is that of a major general who was responsible for this unit at that time before he resigned.
And Tankiso, the two ISIS members, from the understanding that we have on face value, they also appear to have been rather senior within their own sort of groupings within the South African context, right? Indeed.
Diga was regarded as the number one in terms of ISIS hierarchy in this region, in the southern African region. Financier, recruiter, sourced money, assisted with operations. He was very senior. However, based on the affidavit deposed by his brother in the urgent application, as I mentioned earlier on, his life had come under threat from the SNDF and other law enforcement authorities, compelling him to get a bodyguard, in this case, Abutis. And that is how senior he is. I mean, there's so many other things I can talk about him that I can't really reveal, but he was very senior. He was also, when he was sanctioned along with Siraj Miller. I don't know if you know him. Farhad Huma, he regards himself as a former terrorism activist, but now turned politician. So his affiliations and the circles that he roamed around in were of those of senior individuals within ISIS cells in Southern African region.
And as we speak, right, they're presumed dead or missing.
Indeed. One of my Hawks members, when the charge sheet came out yesterday and Bernadette was confused about the three murders, we were all confused because the investigation was centered around Matipa's murder. And when these two charges were added, we were all asking ourselves, who were these people that have been murdered? Sources told me that, no, we presume these guys are dead because there's no sign of life. We've never been able to get a hold of them. No one has seen them. So presumably they're dead.
And then, Tankiso, how does this relate to Abubakar Ali? We've previously interviewed you here on The Lead in regards to this particular local ISIS cell leader that was based out of the inner city, Johannesburg. Do we know if there's any connections between the two presumed dead senior ISIS leaders and then Abubakar Ali?
On face value, and from my opinion, yes, there probably is a connection, because if you look at the people that were sanctioned along with Mr. Diga, I think in 2022, early 2022, one of those people is Farhad Huma. Farhad Huma was also sanctioned and was also implicated in an attack at a Woolworths stand in Durban, I believe in 2018. One of the guys who was implicated with Farhad Huma there is appearing in Joburg for a kidnapping matter. So there are connections between these individuals. However, their activities are obviously isolated or not connected to each other, but they fall under the same umbrella and most likely do know each other.
Bernadette, the bail proceedings are coming up. It's been postponed to that. We've seen a lot of, obviously, secrecy around the identities of the accused at this time. Of course, as you guys have indicated, the ID parade still needs to happen. Do you expect a lot more detail to come out in the bail proceedings, or do you feel like a lot of it will be still sort of kept quite secretive, given the senior positions of all of these SNDF members, and presumably, their operations are quite covert, so they'd like to keep it that way? What do you expect when the bail proceedings get underway?
Well, we certainly are expecting more information and more details to emerge. First and foremost, of course, as long as the identity parade has been conducted by then, the identities of the accused along with their ranks. And then there are two circumstances under which things that happen in open court can kind of be curtailed or held in camera or limited in terms of what can be released and what can be publicized. The one is if a minor is obviously involved. The second is when there's state security issues at play. So that's the only thing that could potentially come into play in this instance. But on the face of it, as it stands, just like any other accused before the court, the accused currently before the court in this case are going to be subject to a public open trial. And so there is no reason, unless it has to do with their operations and their sort of tactics and those kinds of things, that anything should be hidden or should take place behind closed doors or in camera in these proceedings. At the end of the day, this is a murder, kidnapping, fraud, etc., case. And these are high-ranking members of the SNDF, but they are not above the law. And they need to be treated the same as any other accused before the court would be treated. And that's what we're expecting the court to do.
Sure. As all of us, taking part in this conversation, we really haven't seen something like this in more contemporary history in, democratic South Africa. It's quite an unusual case. Yeah, you have two senior local Islamic State members, as they understood. They're alleged to have gone missing, presumed to be dead. You have a senior Hawks official investigating this. He's said to have uncovered that, this was at the hands of allegedly SNDF members, COVID, highly trained soldiers, and then they get arrested for, allegedly killing this Hawks official, and then it's now come out in the wash that they may have tried to cover this all up. It's quite a lot. It's a very intriguing case. It's risky business, obviously, for everyone involved. Tankiso or Bernadette, I don't know which one of you would like to sort of take a stab at this, but it's obviously going to be a long-standing issue that will require a lot of follow-up here.
I've been attempting to get a hold of Mr. Abadiga's brother, who's the one who was responsible for lodging that urgent application. And apparently he skipped the country as soon as Lieutenant Colonel Matipa was killed. That shows the extent of which, or the extent of how dangerous the situation is and how unpredictable it is. And these are covert operatives that we are speaking about. So you will never know where the danger will come from. I mean, even Abadiga himself being kidnapped, he couldn't have possibly guessed that he'd be allegedly be taken by operatives of the SNDF. We're in for a wild ride.
Bernadette, lastly, you have the final word. What does this say about the state of law enforcement in South Africa today? Like, the gloves are off on almost all fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's, we've been speaking in the newsroom and I said to someone yesterday, it gives you that terrifying feeling that more and more we are living in a mafia state. And of course, this case because of these arrests, this case is obviously front of mind now. But and in this case now we have very high-ranking members of the SNDF who have been implicated. But we must remember that part of the reason that Matipa's murder was made headlines and was such a big story at the time was because we are repeatedly seeing people in law enforcement, whistleblowers, these kinds of people who are trying to fight the good fight, root out corruption, and sort of take our country forward after what we've experienced. We are repeatedly seeing them targeted. And perhaps not in the same way, perhaps not by law enforcement officials themselves, but I don't think that this trend is going to end anytime soon. And it certainly does need attention because we do have so much fraud and corruption and rot that needs to be rooted out. But when we see incidents like this, when we see the people who are trying to actually take up the cudgels being taken out, obviously that's discouraging for other people. And it makes you scared that we're going to be sort of stuck in limbo perpetually.
Thank you so much to Bernadette and Tankiso for illuminating a lot more about this rather intriguing story. 1st of July has been set down for this bail application to be heard. Let's see if a lot more detail comes out. Thank you so much, Tankiso and Bernadette, for availing yourselves to the lead.
Thank you, Graham.
To our trending topic now, and good news, Josie residents, your electricity is here to stay. Last year, Eskom threatened to cut off the City of Gold power supply if it had failed to pay up. But now, Johannesburg Mayor Dada Marero says they'll fork out 3.2 billion rand to the power utility to keep the lights on, following mediation by Electricity Minister Josienso Ramokgopa. payments, though, will be made over the next 4 years. Utility City Power at first disputed the amount, claiming their meters and escoms did not square up. But an independent audit by the National Energy Development Institute had cleared the air. And don't worry, the mayor promises not to increase your rates to settle this debt. Ramaphosa, meanwhile, says it's not sustainable to keep asking the poor to choose between simply buying bread and electricity, as councils up and down the country collectively owe Eskom a whopping 370 billion rand in debt. The minister adds Joburg's case is a blueprint that can be replicated elsewhere. And finally, love life scandals refuse to give former Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba a break. It's been revealed that his second ex-wife, Norma Ngoma, has given a tell-all interview in a Showmax series episode called Untied. It was meant to air today, but Gigaba has since been successful at the courts in postponing this episode's airing until 7 July, giving him time to come up with arguments against MultiChoice. It's understood Ngoma details claims of infidelity, porn addiction, and misuse of taxpayer money for personal trips by Gigaba during their 4-year marriage. But Gigaba, who's currently a co-chair of Parliament's Standing Committee on Defence, claims this airing of the episode will harm his reputation and dignity, especially in the eyes of his 2 children. The politician's been trying to get full access to the episode ahead of its airing, only for MultiChoice to release limited clips, which he's not happy with. Gigaba's, of course, no stranger to controversy. In 2018, a video of him masturbating was leaked online and to the press. Many of you in the News 24 comment section, though, claim that Gigaba has not much of a reputation left to protect. From alleged clandestine Hawks murder cover-ups to a saucy Showmax episode under wraps, we're living in certainly interesting times, to say the least. Let's have a listen to your voice notes from our previous edition, entitled Mashatile, his sister-in-law, and the 180 billion rand lotto deal. The Amabongane Center for Investigative Journalism has revealed that Kumo Bakhatso's company, that's the sister-in-law of the deputy president, that company, Bellamont Gaming, is now among the key shareholders of Sizakaya Holding. It's the company that won the country's most lucrative tender, which is, of course, this latest license to operate the lottery. That's 180 billion rand guaranteed for Kumo Bakhatso and her affiliates, although all involved here deny that this is a politically connected case of patronage. Let's have a listen to some of your voice notes here.
Yeah, they must share this money with us. It took us for something like 8 weeks for us to be able to someone win the lotto. Otherwise, you can check when it started, no one won the lotto, the bonus. You see, they must share the money. Nowadays, the lotto can't even get 5 rands now. You see.
Shoo! It's so disheartening in a country that has such a high unemployment rate and the majority of people living below the breadline, that you see such, where an elite number, a few elite people are always getting a piece of the pie. I'm sure the late Chris Hani must be turning in his grave to see this. This is what he was scared of, that an elite few will drive luxury cars with no care in the world for the poor people. Something needs to change in this country, and it needs to change now.
Good evening, Sizakaya Holding. Wish to hear from you guys. How would you help for those who are still the poor of the poorest in South Africa? How would you be able to open your hands to those who are extremely in need of your help? Like me, I opened my shop around 2022, but unfortunately for me, it didn't work well. But I have submitted my funding application around last year, but it took a very long time and it's approved, but I am still waiting for it. And my business is now stuck. Otherwise, I have registered and then am done with all the paperwork. But the thing is, I have no one to look at so that he can support me. So without me playing this game, how are you supporting regarding the sponsors or anything that you do for those who are in need? Thank you so much.
Good evening, News 24. This is David Chabangu. I'm concerned about Kumo Bukhatsu. So actually, if it's a question, if she was not a sister-in-law of our deputy president, would we speak the same tune?
It means if you are related to a politician, you must not be a business person.
Hi there. If this is the new lottery, people, why don't you guys divide up the money even more? Like, instead of one person winning 50 million, why don't you have them win like 30 million and divide the rest so more people can win millions? I mean, I think it's ridiculous to have people win 5 rand 20s, 7 rand 50s. I mean, it's ridiculous. The more people you have win big, the quicker this country will become a first world country. Just think about it, guys. Just my thought.
That's a very interesting thought and a very interesting way of putting at it. Can you imagine that? We all play the lotto and we all sort of get a nice sizable winning out of the scenario. Please keep your voice notes coming. You can send it all to our 072 562 3179 number. And if you'd like to, you can send mails to thelead@24.com. Hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple and YouTube podcast channels. My name's Graham Robe and I'm in, of course, so long as there's news, we'll have the lead.